Hi, I'm Christina and this is a book review of Our Missing Hearts by Celeste Ng. So this was published in October 2022 and it's her third novel. I absolutely loved her first two novels, Everything I Never Told You and Little Fires Everywhere. They were both 5-star reads for me and they're both some of my absolute favourite books of all time. So I would say that she is one of my favourite authors. So I was very much looking forward to reading this book and I have been highly anticipating it for a couple of years now actually. I have been looking forward to her third novel for a very long time. So I got my hands on it as soon as I could and I have to say I really enjoyed this one. So both of her previous novels were contemporary novels, literary fiction, I would say, whereas this one is kind of a little bit dystopian, a little bit science fiction, but it is still a kind of contemporary novel. And I think that's because this is set in a kind of near dystopian future in America, but it all feels very real and very relevant to the times in which we live now. So the dystopian quality is definitely there, but also it feels very grounded in reality and the kind of political situations that we do see ourselves in now. So I thought that was really, really well done. I think the way in which she portrayed that worked really well. So in this story, we have something called PACT, P-A-C-T, and that means preserving American cultures and tradition, and it's something that has gone through Congress and it is now law in America. So in this story, PACT is about identifying people who are seen to be anti-American, those who are challenging the views held by the government and those that are seen to pose some kind of threat to American society. And the people who are being targeted are people of Asian origin and they are called PAOs in this book. So I'll just read you a quote because I think it explains it better than I could. So here. Being a PAO, a person of Asian origin, the authorities reminded everyone was not itself a crime. PACT is not about race, the president was always saying. It is about patriotism and mindset. So the idea that they're trying to hide under patriotism in a way to encourage racism and to encourage violence and hatred towards certain people. And I think she does this so well in this story because I think especially since the coronavirus pandemic, there has been a rise in anti-Asian hate in America and I'm sure across the world too. So I think she's really kind of drawing on that in this story. And I think she does it in a really intelligent, careful, considered kind of way. So in this story, we focus on one central family. We have Mother Margaret, Father Ethan and son Bird. Now his actual name is Noah, but everybody affectionately calls him Bird. So in this story, when we first meet the family, Bird is 12 years old and his mother has disappeared from their lives when he was 9, so 3 years ago. And that is because she is a person of Asian origin. And as a poet, her work became popular with people who were rebelling against PACT as a piece of law. And her kind of poetry became just symbolic with the movement against this. And so even though she herself wasn't necessarily fighting against the cause of PACT, she became synonymous with it. And because of that, she was then in danger. And the way in which PACT works is that if a person who has children is seen to be being anti-American, one of the things they will do is remove their child or their children from them and relocate them in a way in which you'll probably never see your child again and you probably have no way in which to see where they've gone or to contact them. And I think she was saying in the acknowledgements as well that she was focusing on this because throughout history, a way in which to keep people under control was to take their children away from them. And that's been something that has happened throughout history. And I think it's obviously been very successful too in history. And so I think she drew on that in a really, really interesting way because it's something that has happened in real life and then she's brought it into fiction. So I definitely think she blurs the lines between dystopian and reality. And I think she does it really well. So one of the people that Bird meets who is very important in his life is a girl called Sadie, and that she would be his best friend at school, I would say. And then she is one of these children who has been removed under the Pact legislation and been placed in a new kind of foster family. And so I think when he starts meeting Sadie, she kind of challenges his ideas just about the world, about the politics, about the government, about life in general. And I think the way in which this has all been, I think Pact is in place for about a decade when we're at this situation. And obviously they've stopped teaching children the real kind of history and the real politics, and they just have this kind of Pact approved version. So all of the children, I can't be expected to really know or to really understand because nobody is teaching them formally. And Bird's father is so terrified of losing him, of something happening, that he will not teach him anything about the true history or what actually happened with his mother. And you can see why, because he's obviously doing that to protect his child. He's doing absolutely everything to protect Bird, but in doing so, he's kept him very much in the dark about most things in life, to be honest. I think all of these children are living very kind of sheltered lives and they don't know the true history. The teachers can't teach it to them, but nobody is willing to kind of go against Pact, because if you do, you yourself, your children could be taken away from you. So yeah, I think it's a very interesting premise, a very interesting setup, and I think the characters are done really well. So the story is told through two perspectives. So the first part of the book is told through Bird's perspective, so the son's perspective, and then the second part of the book is told through the mother's perspective, Margaret's perspective. And yeah, I think that worked pretty well. It's nice to see two different points of views in a book. I think that was good. I don't think I would have wanted to just see from Bird's point of view the whole time, because obviously as a child there's so much he doesn't understand, that it was nice when we got the mother's perspective, that we were actually let in on, you know, what actually happened, how did all of this kind of come about. So I think it was good the way in which she split that up and maybe see different points of views. And I will say I thought it was a very moving story. There was one point, I won't say which point, but there was one point in which I did well up. It did make me feel very emotional. And I think that's just because the way in which this whole situation happens is that it feels like this could genuinely happen in the future. And obviously that makes it a very impactful read. And I think that just goes to show, because she's drawing on things that have happened in history and things that could happen. Now, in terms of ranking them with her other books, I will say I did prefer her other two novels over this one. So I am going to be giving this one 4 stars. It was a good read, I enjoyed it. It's a very kind of slow-paced story, I would say, and there was a few times I think I would have liked the pace just kind of cranking up a notch just a little bit. I can also appreciate why it is a slow story. I think her other two books are kind of slow burns as well. But I think the other two stories are just some of my absolute favourite books of all time. They're both definite 5-star reads. And this one, it just wasn't quite as good for me. I feel like a little bit of the magic was missing in this story compared to the other two. And I'm thinking it might be because half of the story is told from a child's perspective. I do think it was more difficult to connect to these characters than it was the characters that she wrote in her other novels. And I do think it might be because he is a child, and there's obviously so much about the politics that he doesn't understand. I feel when we got to the second part of the story with the mother, I was much more connected to the story because it was being told through an adult perspective. And I think it just really kind of, rather than all of these things that we didn't quite understand, because we're seeing it through the eyes of a child, seeing it through the eyes of the mother, definitely worked so much better. So yes, I did enjoy it. I definitely would recommend it, but I would definitely say my favourites are still the other two. I'm not sure if I can pick a favourite between Little Fires Everywhere and Everything I Never Told You. They're both some of my favourite books of all time. So unfortunately this one isn't going up there as one of my favourite books of all time, but it was still a really good read and I still really enjoyed it. If you haven't read any of her books yet, I don't think I'd suggest starting with this one. I think start with one of the others. I think probably start with Little Fires Everywhere, just because I think it was a little bit better, to be honest. I feel like it had just a little bit more magic. Now, she's always had these kind of discussions on real families and talking about racism and all of these underpinnings of politics. I do think that's been a theme that she's always put through her stories. But I think the other two, for me, just kind of did something a little bit more special than this one. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. I think it was a really good read, and it's definitely one of those ones that makes you think. I think if you finish this book, you're definitely going to be sitting there mulling things over and just kind of thinking that, yeah, this could actually happen, and that is obviously very scary, it's very unnerving, and I think she gets the seriousness of that absolutely spot on. You do sit there and you do think this is genuinely something that could happen in our society, and that's obviously incredibly unnerving, and well, more than unnerving. And I think she does nail that really, really well, and that's because she's just such a wonderful writer. Her writing is so beautiful. I've always thought that. All three of her novels, she's just got excellent writing, and you will not be disappointed. So I also want to read you just a couple of quotes just to kind of give you a feel for the writing and to show off how beautiful her writing is, but also to kind of illustrate a few points. So this one on page 158, I think really shows the state of the society, the state of the government, the state of people and jobs and security and so many different things. And this is the one that I really think nails it down to real life, and you do go, that's happening in our society right now. So I'll read you the quote. So things were already starting to fray, even then. Cut hours, lower wages, prices beginning to climb, but it wasn't everywhere yet. You still saw people buying new clothes, eating in restaurants. At night, certain parts of town still shimmered and hummed with the collected energy of people who gathered just to be young and alive in the dark. It was still possible to enjoy things, to waste time. It was still possible to sit on a park bench or out on the stoop and watch other people go by, smiling and laughing and smile back. I think that really illustrates now the whole kind of, you know, the cost of living crisis, prices increasing, the effect of people's jobs and 0-hour contracts and losing hours. And I think, yeah, I feel that thing so contextually, like now it feels so relevant. So the other one I want to show you is on page 302. And this one is just a wonderful quote about love. So a little bit different. I thought this was such a beautiful passage, just the way in which she'd written it. It really kind of hit me hard. I thought this was such an emotional passage, and just the way she writes it was so wonderful. So I'll read it to you now so you can make your own mind up. So, when does she stop speaking? When are you ever done with the story of someone you love? You turn the most precious of your memories over and over, wearing their edges smooth, warming them again with your heart. You touch the curves and hollows of every detail you have, memorizing them, reciting them once more, though you already know them in your bones. Whoever thinks, recalling the face of the one they loved who was gone. Yes, I looked at you enough. I loved you enough. We had enough time. Any of this was enough. Such a brilliant passage, honestly. When I read that paragraph, it made me emotional, it made me tear up. It almost got me again then. I knew exactly what I was going to read, but I felt the crack in my voice then. I felt myself welling up again. I just think she's such a brilliant writer, and if that paragraph doesn't illustrate that, then I don't know what else will. So yeah, thought it was a really good book. Highly recommend it. I would highly recommend her other two novels. If you haven't read any of Celeste Ng's work yet, I would still recommend starting with Little Fires Everywhere because it's my favourite, so I'm going to be a little bit biased. So yes, that was Our Missing Heart. I will absolutely 100% be purchasing her fourth book whenever that is published, and it will be one of the books that I am most highly anticipating. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. Please do like the video if you've liked it, and please do subscribe if you'd like to see more of me talking about books. And if you have read this book, definitely let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. And if you've read all three of her novels, tell me which one is your favourite. I would love to know. Alright then, see you in my next one. Bye.